take a closer look at the two libraries that we will be working with, or the extensions in the case of Bubble. So both are called frames. One is frames, this one, and then let's see, Frameify is this one. So I'll show you how to install them in a little bit, but we can take a look, just a quick overview on the look of just how the UI ecosystem works in similar ways on no-code platforms and in some coded domains. So for example, these two libraries that I just showed are essentially hybrid, both single element and more complex component providers. So what I mean is, as you could see, we have access to lots of already pre-made, fully operational, ready to go elements and just an array of things. So it's basically everything. So what happens, how it works, well, a lot of the design stuff that we'll be doing, we will just learn by doing. I will just show you how the settings go, but of course there's a lot to it, and UX and UI fields are very diverse and rich. So again, to look at everything from the lens of these component libraries, we start usually in all base libraries or editors, whether they're visual, low code or no code, or even full code repos. We have some access to base components. So on the front end, it's basically a lot of CSS elements. And what these CSS elements is first we have Tailwind CSS, which, as I mentioned, is a very popular framework. What we initially start with if we're working in code environments, is we have these CSS frameworks that define essentially everything as to how every element and combination of elements can look on the screen. One very big one being things like breakpoints. So a lot of the stuff that's contained here, the different flex options and how the flex box works within the world of Tailwind, is managed for us by Bubble when we are working inside of the full stack Bubble environment. So when we're using something like frames and grabbing all of these different components, they essentially already have all of this built in. They are flex enabled. They have conditional settings built in, which show and hide them at different breakpoints. So a lot of this underlying CSS is present here. If we look at, then Tailwind UI, we can now have entire components, which again is very similar to what we have inside a Bubble. So with all of these different components, we then build our projects, and it's everything from forms to group cards, card layouts, sign up pages, alerts. And as you see here, we also have a pretty diverse array of things. So a lot of times, most pro projects and startups and everybody's using one of these kits. There's a lot more, but Tailwind's just one of the more popular ones. So what you then also, these libraries, right? So it basically goes individual components, which then formed into, individual elements or atoms, right? Like a button or a radio checkbox or an input, single text input. Then all of that is formed into components, and those form into sections. And finally, these sections can be put into entire containers and displayed on pages. For example, this is something called Shuffle. And this is not a Bubble direct product, but I just want to, in case you're working in a coded environment and you actually are using raw CSS, you can see here a lot of these libraries show what framework they're actually using. So a library is essentially either a template or a collection of templates that forms the full work. So either an app, it gives you an app or landing page, or just this like wide components library. And here they even tell you which frameworks they support. So Tailwind, Bulma, I believe Bootstrap is also present. Material UI is a big one, right? So there's lots of different options for this stuff, but most of them do have some sort of component / section offerings. So if we select something like this Casper and open it in editor, we're going to open the Tailwind version here. And you can see how there's a similar experience. Oh, looks like account plan just lapsed. Okay. But again, since this is just a basic demo and I have not been working inside of this environment. But yeah, you can see how there's a detailed breakdown of all the different sections that could be used. And when you export one of these shuffle projects, you get the entire CSS code base that can then be integrated. So all of this stuff that we just looked at on the Tailwind side and Frames and Frameify or whichever no-code builder you're in or whichever, of course, all of that stuff takes into account basic and fundamental kind of tenets and very important bits of UI design systems. And while, again, as I mentioned before, this isn't going to be a dedicated UI course, and we'll spend more time building out our actual generative AI and API functionality, but just to get us primed. And as I said, in the next course, we will do a lot longer and deeper dives in how to do modern, clean, awesome UIs. But initially, yeah, if you're new to the world of UI making, again, we'll learn in this course by doing and just by implementing. But of course, there are great resources. For example, in Figma, you could get access to quite easily. This is called Untitled UI. And that's one of the large systems out there. And as you could see, it offers a very detailed, stepped color design system. And there are just lots and lots of different options for everything, as we saw on the other side. So these would be the atomic elements, something that we break down to the smallest component. And of course, that has to have a lot of variations. So we always need to make sure that we build these in when we're working in Bubble as well. Usually these are done through conditionals, but we always start with kind of our base buttons. So then in Figma here, what I like to do is aggregate a lot of these design systems and then look at them and borrow from them, use them as almost like a inspirational canvas. So this is Shad CN, what we looked at a little bit ago inside of Figma. So same components, as you could see, just how everything looks. Things have a very similar, familiar, modern look. For example, just one thing that jumps out, you probably recognize this toggle very well. This is an Ionic / Apple. It's a human design system, very similar, familiar toggle there. There are other options, smaller known names. This one's called Final UI. And here we have lots and lots of different, again, also pre-made package templates inside of this one system. So a lot of times, yes, whatever is in Figma gets used as this inspirational starting point. And there are, of course, just lots and lots of different options. And I'll post links to these different UI systems so that you can then get access to. Again, they have different price points, like Shad is free, Untitled does cost. Final UI comes with a subscription to UI 8, and yeah, but again, I'll post different videos. And then finally, some great resources to look at, to read. One of the better UI sort of people, or at least in my eyes, is Michael Malowitz and Diana. I hope I'm saying their last name. So they've been behind some of even the naming the trends or the more popular UI design styles in recent years. And they've published entire books, which you can get access to. This one, for example, is called UI Design Styles. And here it's nice because you can just quickly reference if you want to use a specific style as an artistic when you're designing your UIs. You may not want to just do strictly just one of these things. You want to pull from different ones, so you'd select what you want to see and go. But again, to quickly just get a background on this is that every couple of years or so, we have these long-standing UI patterns that you see in most websites, and that's quite standard, normal. It doesn't change. But then there are these trends that pop up and do add additional flavor. So, for example, one trend is new brutalism, it's called. Yeah, so it's like that. New brutalism. And some popular companies that have used it are actually Figma itself and Gumroad. So we can then quickly reference here something like that, or instead then let's go check out glassmorphism. And glassmorphism has been very popular from Windows to Apple products. It's this glassy opaque kind of surface. So here, as you could see in this book, you can learn very detailed, you have to figure out kind of very detailed steps and directions on how to build those types of UIs. So here, now we're looking at Aurora UI gradients. Again, something that's been named by Michael and has become easily accessible in these professional UI standards. So he is, by the way, a renowned and big UI designer. So there is always great kind of foundation underneath everything here. So it's been a great reference for us, and we will of course use a lot of these principles as we build out length space. But yeah, so this is just one of the books that you can reference and go and check out all these different. So new morphism, one more quick breakdown on how to achieve that effect, and this is all those shadows that make things pop out and make them look very realistic. Yeah, and then there are other books. This one is also from Michael, and this is like a UI design pedia manual. So everything here that has to do with the actual science and art and the overall craft of how to put together great UIs is here. And there are of course many other books, but this has been one book that's very helpful, very well written, and just ultimately knowledgeable in every sense of the word. If you are looking to get a good primer and figure out how grid systems work, which is what we will look at as we build out our dashboard, how you could have 10-point grids, how you can have 8-point grids. This is actually a very big thing, which we'll look in an upcoming video as we start laying out the structure for the dashboard. But everything we will do within length space and future videos will be on an 8-point grid. So everything is divisible into 8, 4s, 2s. But yeah, there's lots of different, very specific things, such as even the amount of pixels that you should put in between your input labels and the input themselves, and lots of different things. So we, of course, will condense all of this into very easy to follow and digest, and hopefully repetitive kind of bits, so that we don't have to read these entire, because some of these books are 200 to 300 pages and there's just an endless amount of information. So of course you're more than welcome to dive into it, and I will post resources to it. But for the most part, we just need to know the very, very kind of fundamental bits that we'll be using all the time. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this video up. See you soon.